A simple evening in the brownstone turns dangerous the moment trouble bangs on our door, and Wolfe hates interruptions. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the Tempest at Precinct 35. The rain that night wasn't falling so much as pummeling Manhattan like a boxer working out grudges, and I was the poor sap caught between rounds. By the time I reached the corner of 35th, my hat had given up. My coat felt like it had developed gills, and my socks were making noises unbecoming of civilized footwear. I was already planning the speech I'd give Fritz about hot coffee and maybe a miracle when the universe decided to improve my evening in its own special way. A police cruiser came fishtailing toward the curb with enough enthusiasm to make me question whether I owed the NYPD money. The vehicle skidded, hydroplaned, and stopped a foot from my knee. A uniformed officer exploded out of the passenger side, a soaked blur in a cap that was losing its battle with gravity. His eyes were round as doorknobs, and his breath came out in frantic puffs that added more fog to the downpour. He shoved a sealed envelope into my hand like it was ticking. "Get this to Nero Wolfe," he barked. "Now." I opened my mouth to ask which precinct had decided to outsource its mail service to street ambushes, but he was already sprinting back to the cruiser. The car screeched away, fishtailing into the rain-shredded dark, faster than a rat fleeing a kitchen light. I looked at the envelope. Red stamp, bold, official, Precinct 35, and sealed tight, not the casual, drop this by when convenient variety. My evening had just done a somersault into trouble. I climbed the brownstone steps, leaving a trail of city slush that would have earned me a lecture from Wolfe if he had a drop less self-control. I pushed open the door and stepped into the gold-lit sanctuary of our hallway, with the grateful sigh of a man returning from combat. My hat dripped onto the mat in a steady beat that Fritz would later scold me for. The air inside smelled of warmth, polish, and something delicious simmering in Fritz's domain. Too early for dinner, probably stock. I sloshed toward the office, each step accompanied by a squelch that belonged in a horror picture. Wolfe was in his chair, naturally, with his bulk settled behind his desk, like a judge contemplating the sins of mankind. He lifted his eyes as I entered, took in my drowned rat condition, and offered an eloquent grunt of disappointment. "Goodwin," he said, far too calm for the state I was in, "your appearance is an offence to the senses." "Believe me," I said, "I tried to leave the weather outside, but it insisted on coming along." I held up the envelope. "Special delivery from the boys in blue, Precinct 35. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Rainstorms, sudden envelopes, and the NYPD were all things he disliked individually. Combined, they constituted a conspiracy. He extended a hand without rising or even shifting in his chair. I crossed the room, dropped the envelope into his palm, and watched his thumb trace the red stamp. He slit it with the paper knife in one smooth stroke. Wolfe read silently, his lips tightening as though the sentences were personally offending him. When he finished, he handed the letter to me and leaned back, steepling his fingers. The letter was short, typed, and dripping with desperation. A confidential informant inside Precinct 35 feared they were about to be murdered. They begged Wolfe to intervene. No name, no signature, no clue about what they'd witnessed, only that it involved internal corruption of a magnitude that would destroy careers and lives. The writer pleaded that Wolfe act quickly, or someone innocent would die. Lovely. A melodrama wrapped in municipal stationery. I folded the letter and tucked it back inside its envelope. "Looks like you've got a fan," I said. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "Phooey," he muttered, the disgust practically wrapping itself around the consonants. "I do not, will not, interfere in the intramural conflicts of policemen." "Conflicts that involve murder?" I asked, dripping water on the carpet in a pattern Fritz would diagram later. "Archie, if policemen choose to slaughter one another, it is not my affair unless I am retained. The NYPD is an institution designed to manage its own internal turmoil." "You think someone inside a precinct is yelling for help at random?" I waved the envelope. "They addressed it to you, by name. They're counting on you." Wolfe opened one eye, slowly, like a fatigued lion deciding whether to eviscerate a hyena. "Your penchant for moral dramatics is tiresome." Before I could argue, the doorbell rang. 7 chimes, sharp and impatient. Fritz appeared in the office doorway, quiet, precise, and definitely noticing the puddle forming under me. "A telephone call for Mr. Wolfe," he said. Inspector Kramer. Wolfe sighed as though the world were conspiring to disturb his digestion. He gestured. Fritz vanished and returned with the phone tray. Wolfe lifted the receiver. "Yes, Inspector," he said, tone neutral. I listened. Kramer's voice was unmistakable even when muffled by distance and static. Firm, gravelly, and currently wrapped tight like a cable ready to snap. But he wasn't yelling. That alone was notable. "You get anything tonight?" Kramer demanded. Wolfe glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Define your question, Inspector." "Don't play dumb. You know damn well what I'm asking. Anything arrive at your door? Anything unusual?" Wolfe kept silent long enough to violate several conversational statutes. "Inspector," he finally said, "your tone suggests agitation." "Agitation? Sure. My precinct's in chaos. I have a dead officer, a missing file, and half the department tripping over itself. If someone reached out to you, if any kind of message landed in your lap, I need to know now." Wolfe pressed his lips together. "Nothing that concerns you at this moment." My eyebrows shot up. Wolfe was playing coy. That meant one of two things. He didn't trust Kramer's stability on this matter, or he wasn't ready to commit to the game. Probably both. Kramer exhaled hard enough that the static buzzed. "All right, Wolfe," he said, his tone low and grudging. "If anything does show up, you tell me. I'm holding this place together with duct tape." Wolfe said nothing. Kramer hung up without a farewell. Fritz whisked away the tray. I sat on the corner of Wolfe's desk, deliberately dripping on the polished wood. "If the precinct's in chaos," I said, "and some mystery Samaritan is trying to keep an informant alive, maybe we're expected to play knight errant." Wolfe scowled. "Do stop. Your attempts at civic engagement are preposterous. We are detectives, not custodians of moral stability." "You're saying we ignore it?" He tugged his beard, which meant the wheels were turning. "Someone inside Precinct 35 expects me to undertake an impossible chore without retainer, information, or courtesy. I decline." "You can decline anything you like," I said cheerfully, "except the fact that they picked you because they trust you more than their own department." Wolfe's glower intensified. "Your sophistry is wasted." "Sure," I said. "But if that uniform who ambushed me tonight winds up in the morgue tomorrow morning, you'll spend the afternoon blaming yourself and the evening inventing new words for it." "Archie," his voice had the finality of a falling curtain, "enough." But he didn't dismiss me, and he didn't throw away the envelope. That was progress. We sat in silence, me peeling off my wet coat and Wolfian disapproval thickening the air like steam. The rain hammered the windows in relentless sheets. "Someone in that precinct is scared," I said quietly. "Scared enough to hand-deliver a warning to your personal doorstep. That counts for something." Wolfe stared at the envelope on his blotter. Then, in a tone as irritated as it was resigned, he said, "Show me the letter again." I handed it over. He reread it twice, tapping the paper with a thick finger. "This writer is literate," he murmured, "sober and terrified." 3 qualities seldom found in the same precinct. Wolfe shot me a look that suggested I reserve my humour for less delicate moments, but he didn't rebuke me further. At 10:52 p.m, the office doorbell chimed again. Wolfe frowned. "Fritz is not expecting anyone." "Want me to get it?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said sharply. "Stay here." That was new. Protective, even. He reached for the bell cord and tugged. Fritz appeared moments later. "There is no one at the door," he reported. "Perhaps the storm triggered." "Nonsense," Wolfe said. "Archie, check." I did. Rain, empty stoop. No sign of visitors, living or otherwise. When I returned, Wolfe had the envelope in his hand and a look of reluctant engagement on his face. "Very well," he said. "We shall consider the matter, but only consider." "Sure," I said, hanging up my coat. "Considering is free." Wolfe grunted. "You test my patience." "You keep hiring me," I said. "It's a mystery." Wolfe actually allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch before he reasserted sternness. "We will adjourn. I require rest, and you require dryness." "And coffee," I added, "if Fritz has any mercy." Wolfe waved me off like a monarch ending court. "Enough nonsense. To bed." At noon sharp, the bell rang with the kind of muted authority that told me whoever was outside wasn't selling encyclopedias. I was at my desk, typing up a memo Wolfe would ignore, when Fritz appeared to announce, "Inspector Kramer is here." That alone was strange. Kramer almost never arrived at the brownstone at lunchtime, and certainly never during rain that turned the street into a river for rats. When he stepped in behind Fritz, I understood why Fritz's eyebrows had twitched upward. Kramer looked like he'd been dredged out of the Hudson. His trench coat was soaked, his hat drooped like a wilted leaf, and the cigar in his hand was unlit, a detail that should probably go in some manual of omens. He didn't barge, he didn't bark, he just said, "Wolfe, I need a word," and if the sky had split open above us, it wouldn't have been more unexpected. Wolfe was at his desk, arms folded over the equator of his stomach, and he raised his brows at the spectacle. "Inspector," he said, with that infuriating calm only he can manage, "your condition suggests you have not had the benefit of shelter." "Yeah, well, your sidewalk doesn't come with a canopy," Kramer grunted. "May I come in?" Wolfe blinked. Asking permission nearly toppled him off the planet. "Enter," he said. Kramer stepped fully inside and dripped on the carpet with the apologetic dignity of a man unused to apologizing. He didn't sit. He didn't take off the coat. He just held the soggy cigar between two fingers like a badge of office. "We've got a problem," he said. "A big one." Wolfe gestured at a chair. "If you insist on distressing my carpet, at least have the courtesy to do so while seated." Kramer sat, creaking like wet timber. I waited for the explosion, but his voice stayed low, tight as piano wire. "An officer from 35 is dead," he said. "Patrolman Henry Lamb, found early this morning in the evidence room." That was enough to pull me forward in my chair. Wolfe said nothing. He didn't need to. Kramer filled the silence himself. "The DA wants it quiet. They're calling it an accident or maybe a suicide, but I've been on the job too long to swallow that." Wolfe picked up a paperweight and turned it once. "You want me to express surprise?" Kramer's jaw clenched. "No, I want you aware, because you're involved whether you like it or not." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folder, not soaked, interestingly, and handed it across. "List of personnel at 35, everyone who worked with Lamb." I took it before Wolfe could scowl at the intrusion. The names ran down the page like a roll call of tension. Detectives, patrolmen, clerks, a couple of sergeants whose reputations I recognized from gossip. Wolfe gave me a glare that meant, "Don't drop anything." I didn't. Kramer leaned back, drumming the unlit cigar against the chair arm. "Lamb was going to testify," he said. "Internal Affairs had him lined up for a big meeting. He told someone he knew something that would blow the precinct sky high. Then he turns up dead in a locked evidence room. The DA wants the paperwork clean. I want the truth." Wolfe made a dismissive noise that could have meant anything from "char" to "you bore me." "If you want the truth," he said, "consult your own investigators." "I do," Kramer snapped, "but half the damn squad is scared stiff. The Gazette's already sniffing around. They printed a teaser this morning about internal turmoil." Wolfe's nostrils flared. Wolfe despises messy public speculation more than he despises physical exertion, and that is saying something. Kramer saw the reaction and pressed. "We need quiet, and we need competence, both of which you've got." Wolfe snorted. "Do not flatter me, Inspector. It is unseemly." "Wasn't flattery," Kramer said. "Just fact." Wolfe's fingers tapped the armrest in irritation, which meant his intellect was already chewing. He hates being baited, but he hates being right even more. "What?" Wolfe asked. "Precisely do you expect of me?" "Nothing," Kramer said. "Yet." Which, coming from Kramer, is practically a valentine. I flipped through the personnel list, noticing Lamb's name highlighted in pencil. "Any enemies?" I asked. "Everyone's got one," Kramer muttered. "But Lamb?" He was quiet, straight, maybe too straight. Wolfe's eyes sharpened slightly. "A man about to testify often is." Kramer nodded grimly. "He must have known something dangerous, but I don't know what." Wolfe lifted a hand. "Archie." That meant I had a task coming. I closed the folder. "Yes, sir?" "You will go to that precinct, speak with clerks, secretaries, civilians, avoid the officers unless addressed. I do not wish you embroiled in internecine hostilities." "Internecine hostility is my specialty," I said. Wolfe growled. "Do not be impertinent. Gather information without provoking conflict." "In other words," I said, "behave." "Yes." "I'll try it once. If it doesn't fit, I'll return to my usual model." Kramer huffed, which for him approximated a laugh. "Listen," he said, shifting in the chair. Lamb wasn't perfect, but he wasn't dirty. Somebody wanted him quiet. Wolfe's brows twitched. Inspector, if you expect me to absorb your burdens, you err. Kramer stood, slowly, heavily. I'm not asking you to solve it. I'm telling you what's happening. If more blows up, and it will, you'll be dragged in. Better you know now. Wolfe folded his arms. Your foresight is appreciated. Your timing is not. Kramer adjusted his soaked coat. Wolfe, look, just don't ignore this. That was the Kramer equivalent of kneeling prayer. All right, Wolfe said, formal as a contract. I will observe. Nothing more. For now, Kramer said and headed for the door. As he passed me, he muttered, Keep him honest, Goodwin. I try, I said, but honesty's a heavy lift. Yeah, he muttered. Tell me about it. Fritz appeared, guiding him out with solemn courtesy. When the door shut, Wolfe exhaled a breath that suggested he'd smelled something distasteful. Archie, he said coldly, we will not take this case. Sure, I said, but you're already defending Kramer's honor. Should I fetch a flag? He shot me a look that carried enough voltage to power a streetcar. Your adolescent provocations are insufferable. Only on weekdays, I said. Weekends I switch to mature provocations. He ignored me, which was his way of conceding I'd scored a point. Go, he said. Speak to the civilians. I'm not committing myself until I comprehend the scope. And if the scope is wide enough to swallow us? Then you, he said, will avoid being swallowed. A statement that might have been protectiveness wearing a sarcastic hat. Precinct 35 sat like a brick fortress with windows too eager to leak gossip. I entered with the casual swagger of a man who knows cops love him about as much as they love early paperwork. A clerk at the front desk recognized me before I opened my mouth. You're Wolfe's guy, she said. Don't know if that's good or bad today. Depends who's asking, I said. Nobody you need to worry about. Wrong. Always a red herring. She leaned in. They found Lamb this morning. Locked room. No witnesses. People are spooked. I lowered my voice. He have enemies? Everyone here does, she whispered. But Lamb, he kept to himself. Maybe that was the problem. I moved through the neighborhood. Cafe counters, cigar shops, the corner shoeshine joint. Lamb's name floated through the rumors like a ghost. Some said he'd argued with another officer. No details. Others said he'd been quiet lately, avoiding people. A guy at the cafe counter said, he looked like a man carrying a bomb. A shoeshine kid said, he told Sergeant Vale he knew something big. A clerk at a stationery store said she'd seen him pacing outside the precinct last night. Red herrings danced everywhere. Jealousy, debt, a supposed mistress, all juicy and unsupported. But the theme was clear. Lamb had known something huge. Back inside the precinct, a desk sergeant with the expression of a man awaiting a firing squad crooked his finger at me. You Goodwin? Unless my mother lied. He swallowed hard. Lamb came to me yesterday. Said he had evidence, real stuff. Said he was meeting internal affairs. He said if anything happened to him, this place would blow wide open. He wiped his brow. Now he's dead. How well did you know him? Enough to know he wasn't crooked. Someone wanted him gone. By the time I stepped back into the brownstone, I had enough precinct gossip clinging to me to fill a municipal archive, and Wolfe looked about as pleased to see me as a man watching someone track mud across a Persian rug. You are late, he announced as though I'd failed to return from a 2-year expedition. And damp. That's the weather's fault, I said, hanging my coat with the care Fritz demands if I want to keep my hands. The attitude is mine. The gossip is the precinct's, and the privilege of hearing all of it is yours. Wolfe made a noise that implied the privilege was unwelcome. He drew a sip of beer, his afternoon glass precisely chilled, and eyed me over the rim. Report. I dropped into the red leather chair with a sigh. Lamb had both fans and enemies. The fans are nervous. The enemies are louder. Depending on which cop you ask, he was either Saint Lamb of the evidence room or a guy who got himself mixed up in gambling. Wolfe's eyelids twitched. Gambling? Kickbacks, I said. One version has him skimming. Another has him spying on someone else skimming. Wolfe took another measured sip. It was less about the drink and more about resisting the urge to strangle the city of New York. Nonsense. I agree, I said. But precinct rumor mills don't run on logic. They run on caffeine, resentment, and people who never learn to whisper. Wolfe set the beer down with surgical precision. "Did you retrieve anything of substance?" "A few things." I pulled the envelope from my pocket, the same anonymous message that started this mess. First off, this wasn't Lamb's. Everyone I talked to swears he wouldn't send anything anonymously. Too earnest. Too square. Wolfe extended a hand like Caesar accepting tribute. I passed the envelope over. He examined the flap again, frowning at a tiny embossed symbol I had ignored earlier. "This," he murmured, "is peculiar." "I thought so too," I lied. "It's a little fancy for a precinct guy needing help." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "Your observations lack rigor." He tugged the bell cord. Fritz arrived, appearing silently as a well-trained apparition. "Bring Mr. Goodwin's notes," Wolfe said, "and summon Theodore from the plant rooms when his hands are free." Fritz bowed and vanished. Wolfe turned back to the flap. "This emblem," he said, "is botanical, a stylized leaf." "Which means what?" He looked at me the way a professor might inspect a student who just confused Shakespeare with stenography. "It means, Archie, that I prefer answers grounded in fact. Theodore will know. Or he'll tell you it's the symbol for a rare orchid that blooms only on the second Tuesday of months without R," I offered. "Your buffoonery is ill-timed." At 4:03 p.m., Theodore arrived, smelling faintly of sphagnum moss and righteous indignation. Wolfe gestured him forward. "Observe." Theodore leaned in, squinting. "Ah, that's not botanical, sir." Wolfe's grunt was half relief, half annoyance. "Explain." "It's a stylized olive branch, symbol of the Police Benevolent Association. They use it on membership mailers and voting notices." Wolfe sat back, steepling his fingers. "I see. Thank you, Theodore." Theodore left with the stiff dignity of a man who has offered truth to a king. I turned to Wolfe. "So, our mystery Samaritan is part of the PBA?" Wolfe nodded once. "At minimum connected, and literate enough to type competently." As if on cue, the phone rang. Fritz entered, lifted the receiver, listened, then turned to Wolfe. "Saul Panzer for Mr. Goodwin." I crossed and took it. "Shoot," I said. Saul's voice was quiet, smooth, and as steady as an accountant's pulse. "Archie, your precinct rumour? Dead wrong. Lamb never touched gambling, not directly, not indirectly. I checked every joint in a 2-block radius. No one saw him place a bet, take a cut, or even read the sports page." "Figures," I said. Something smelled phony about it. "Two more things," Saul added. "You picked up a tail." "Cop or crook?" "Cop. 2 of them. Detectives. Sloppy ones. They switched cars twice but kept making the same mistakes." "Which?" "Checking their mirrors too often. One signalled a left turn with his right hand. Amateurs." I glanced at Wolfe. He watched me like someone waiting to hear whether a souffle had collapsed. "Anything else?" I asked Saul. "One more detail," he said. "The precinct's spooked. Word is someone inside knows more than they should, but nobody knows who." "Thanks," I said. "Bill me later." Wolfe raised his brows when I relayed the tailing. "Insufferable," he muttered. "The intellectual poverty of that precinct is staggering. 2 detectives? On you?" I must be irresistible. "Archie, this is not amusing. If they are tailing you, it is because someone regards you as a threat." "Well," I said cheerfully, "it's about time I had admirers." Wolfe's scowl deepened into something almost paternal. "You will stay away from that precinct for at least 48 hours. "Why?" "To prevent your skull from becoming an exhibit." "My skull is very attached to me," I said. "But what if they—" "Archie." He cut me off with a flat palm. "Enough." That tone meant no debate. Wolfe, who despises moving more than philosophy despises physics, was now protective. I tucked that away for future leverage. Fritz entered with a note tray. "Your list from earlier," he said, passing it to Wolfe. "Also, dinner in 3 hours. Duck." Wolfe nodded his appreciation. I made a mental note to avoid any tasks requiring agility after 8 o'clock. Duck does that to him. Wolfe resumed studying the envelope. "This was typed on an Underwood No. 5, he said. "Municipal offices use them still. 35 has several, does it not?" 3, I confirmed. 2 in the squad room, 1 in the clerk's office. Wolfe lifted a brow. "Your memory is adequate." "High praise," I said. "That envelope could have come from anyone in the building." "Not anyone," Wolfe corrected gently. Someone literate enough, fearful enough, and acquainted with the PBA's stationery. So a clerk? Possibly, or a detective with union ties. Which is all of them, I said. Wolfe granted that point with a twitch of his eyebrow. He leaned back in the chair, folding his hands on his stomach. This suggests the writer is not dead, not Lamb. Therefore, someone still alive is expecting my help. That or they mailed it before breakfast and went to meet their maker by lunch, I said. Wolfe ignored me. Our first false path, then, he said. Gambling, convenient, untrue. Saul confirmed it. Wolfe nodded. Good. I hired him yesterday. I hired him, I corrected. Wolfe frowned. You did so at my implicit instruction. Implicit is doing some heavy lifting there, I said. Wolfe tapped the envelope again. Someone inside fears exposure. Someone else fears being exposed. These two impulses are colliding. Did Kramer give any names? None, and he won't unless forced. And which means we're on our own. Yes, Wolfe exhaled in a slow, controlled hiss. I detest this. I leaned back, stretching my legs. Maybe you should join the force. Desk sergeant. You'd never have to leave your chair, and you'd get to insult people legally. Wolfe's eyes nearly rolled. Archie, that is idiocy. Genuine or artistic idiocy? There is no distinction in your case. At 4:56 p.m., the office bell chimed. Fritz appeared. Beer, sir? Wolfe glared. Do I look in need? Always, I said. Wolfe sighed. Yes, Fritz, one glass. Fritz nodded and left. Wolfe watched him go with a look of long-suffering resignation. Archie, he said quietly, you will follow instructions. You will avoid that precinct for 48 hours. Yes, sir. This is not discretionary. It never is. Wolfe's eyes softened. For him, practically a hug. You are indispensable. You mean useful? No, indispensable. I'll note the date, I said, and buy a hat to commemorate the occasion. He dismissed me with a wave, signalling the end of this round. The orchids were calling, and somewhere in Precinct 35, someone still breathing wanted Wolfe's help badly enough to risk a typewriter and an olive branch seal. As I rose to leave, Wolfe said, Archie. I paused. Sir? Do not be reckless. I'm never reckless, I said, just enthusiastic. Wolfe muttered something in German, and with that he pushed himself to his feet, slowly, like a mountain shifting, and headed upstairs to his orchids, leaving me in the office with a clue, a mystery, and the distinct sense that something inside Precinct 35 was shaking apart like wet plaster. The first clue that the afternoon was about to take a nosedive came when the office doorbell chimed with the meek little tone people use when they're hoping nobody's home. I was typing up notes Wolfe would later claim he never requested, when Fritz appeared at the doorway with his eyebrows doing the subtle semaphore he uses to warn me a guest looks breakable. A woman wishes to see Mr. Wolfe, he said quietly. She is distressed. In Fritz's native Swiss neutrality, that covers everything from a mild worry to full-on hysteria. I glanced at Wolfe. He was deep in contemplation, his eyelids half-masked, his fingers steepled over his equator. Send her in, Wolfe said, which was the verbal equivalent of wolves in fairy tales inviting dinner to come inside. She stepped through the doorway with the careful gait of someone expecting the floorboards to explode. Mid-20s, maybe 30 on a hard day. Pale, dark hair pinned back, hands trembling, not theatrically, but with the genuine vibration of fear that seeped into the bones. She clutched her handbag like a life-preserver. I got to my feet. Miss? Clara, she whispered. Clara Breen. Wolfe nodded once. Sit, Miss Breen. She perched on the edge of the red chair as though it might bite. Her eyes darted around the office. Books, globe, orchids visible through the glass. Me, then finally Wolfe, whom she regarded as though he were a judge on high. I'm sorry, she stammered. I didn't know where else to go. Wolfe inhaled. I assume, he said, voice level and resonant, that you are here regarding Precinct 35. She flinched. Yes, I'm a stenographer there, civilian. And your presence suggests urgency. Her breath wobbled. I'm the one who sent the letter, the one begging you for help. She fumbled in her bag and held up a second envelope, the twin of the one we'd received. My eyebrows tried to escape my face. "You sent that?" I asked. She nodded miserably. "I overheard something, more than something, a conversation in the back office between 3 officers. They were planning to shut someone up. Their words, not mine." She swallowed, voice tightening. "I thought they meant Officer Lamb. He was the only one I knew who'd been talking to Internal Affairs. I tried to warn someone, anyone. I mailed the letter on my way home last night." Wolfe's gaze sharpened, but he didn't move. "Miss Breen, you were attempting to save Lamb." "Yes," she said. "I thought, if you intervened, maybe—" She stopped, the words clogging. "This morning, when I saw the Gazette, I realized I was too late," she shivered. "I think they know I overheard them, and if they do, I'm next." Fritz, sensing imminent collapse, materialized with a glass of water. She accepted it with a shaking hand. Wolfe studied her like a rare specimen. "Tell me," he said gently, which from Wolfe is practically a warm embrace, "which officers were speaking?" "I never saw them directly," she said. "They were around the corner in the supply alcove. But I typed up what I heard afterward. I take notes sometimes, for myself, things I might need later." She reached into her handbag again and produced 2 envelopes. "This one is money," she said quickly. $5,000, all the savings I have." "You are offering a retainer," Wolfe said. "Yes, to hire you, to keep me alive." She thrust the second envelope forward. "And these are photostats, notes I typed from what I overheard. I didn't take anything from the precinct, nothing official, just things I wrote myself." Wolfe nodded approvingly, Cannon satisfied. I took the envelopes, weighed them. The money was respectable. The photostats were crisp. Wolfe lifted a brow. "We accept the retainer." That was the moment Wolfe officially boarded the runaway train. He opened the photostats and read. I watched his expression tighten, then flatten, then sharpen again like a man assembling a complicated stew of outrage, deduction, and indigestion. "These initials," he murmured, "R, G, and H, repeated throughout." "The 3 voices," she said. One had a gravelly tone, one laughed too loudly, the third barely spoke. Wolfe tapped a finger. "Archie." "On it," I said. "Ralston, Greevy, and Houseman." "Precisely." Wolfe shifted in his chair. "Men of middling rank and ambiguous virtue." "Which covers half the NYPD," I said. Wolfe ignored me. "Miss Breen, you have done well, remarkably well." She trembled. "Then you believe me?" "I believe," Wolfe said, "that your testimony, combined with this documentation, is significant and dangerous." "They talked about a Tempest," she said suddenly, "coming to the precinct. Something big, something that would sweep people away. They sounded excited, afraid, both." A lovely motif for the case title. Wolfe handed me the photostats. "Archie, prepare a secure folder." I moved to my desk, sliding the papers into a fresh manila folder marked with one of my best imitation typewritten labels. Wolfe claims he can tell the difference. He can't. "Miss Breen," Wolfe continued, "your next task is survival. Mr. Goodwin will escort you to a safe hotel, one whose staff he trusts. You will remain there until I advise otherwise." "Will the police protect me?" she whispered. Wolfe's face froze. "At the moment, the police are the threat." She shuddered again. I helped her to her feet. "Come on," I said. "Let's get you somewhere less murder-adjacent." We exited onto 35th Street, wind clawing at our coats. At the corner, I felt the hair rise on my neck. A sedan, dark, idling too casually. When we crossed the street, it crossed. When we paused, it paused. "Friend of yours," I murmured. "No," she whispered. "Oh, God." "Relax," I said. If they wanted to kill us, they'd use a duller car. 3 blocks down, the sedan pulled forward. I tightened my grip on Clara's arm. Then a familiar shape stepped out from behind a lamppost. Broad shoulders, jutting jaw, hat pulled low. Pearly Stebbins, the bulldog of Manhattan. He caught up in 3 strides. "Goodwin," he growled, "don't jump." "You first," I said. "Why are you shadowing me?" "Wasn't shadowing you." He jerked a thumb at the sedan. "Them." "Friends of yours?" "Friends of nobody." He looked at Clara. "She's from the precinct." "Very observant," I said. "What do you want, Pearlie?" He leaned in, lowering his voice until it was a rumble. "Keep your girl out of sight. Something inside 35 is spiraling fast." Define spiraling. People are scared. Files missing, officers whispering in corners. Something's going to crack. "And you drop this hint out of pure affection." Pearlie scowled. "I don't want more bodies on my shift. And if someone's hunting civilians, the brass will roast us." He stepped back. "Get her someplace safe, and stay there a while." Then he melted into the shadows like a bulldog fading into a fog bank. I walked Clara the rest of the way to the hotel, a quiet, mid-range joint whose staff owed me enough favours to forget faces when necessary. I checked her in under a name so fake it squeaked. In the lobby, she clutched my sleeve. Do you really think they'll come after me?" "Yes," I said, no point sugarcoating, "but they'll have to get through me first." Her eyes filled, but she nodded bravely and headed upstairs with the bellboy. When she was out of sight, I phoned Wolfe. "She's secured," I told him, and Pearlie popped out of a lamppost to tell me the precinct is about to explode. "Pfui," Wolfe muttered. "These histrionics are intolerable." He seemed sincere. That is worse. "Also," I added, "the sedan tail is still out there. Only one guy inside now. He's pretending to read a newspaper in the world's worst way." Wolfe exhaled. "Archie." "Yes?" "You will stay there." "I plan to." "All night?" "Come again?" "Your presence will dissuade pursuit. Miss Breen will feel safer, and I do not wish to discover your body in the morning." "You always know how to make a guy feel cherished." "Do not be imbecilic. Stay. That is an order." "Fine," I said, "but you owe me coffee." "Fritz will prepare some." I hung up, dropped into a lobby chair, crossed my legs, and told the bellboy to bring me 2 papers and a ginger ale. As the clock crept toward evening and hotel lamps warmed the lobby, I thought of Wolfe, massive, immovable, pretending sentimentality was a disease, and I grinned. Because for a man who claimed to despise trouble, he sure did a lot to keep me out of it. The morning started with the kind of alarm clock no sane person wants, the shriek of police sirens bouncing off hotel brick at 5:12 a.m., rattling the lobby windows like they were trying to escape. I dozed off in a chair that had all the comfort of a Protestant pew, and when the sirens drilled through my skull, I sat up so fast I nearly dislocated something. The night clerk poked his head out of the office. "Another fire?" he asked. "Or a politician?" "Neither," I said. "Both would smell better." I stepped outside, blinking into the cold dawn. 2 patrol cars were angled at the curb across the street, blocking a sedan whose paint job looked suspiciously like the one that had been tailing us yesterday. But the uniformed men weren't looking at the sedan. They were staring upward at the apartment building across from the hotel. A detective sedan screeched up, disgorging a stocky silhouette that could only be Pearlie Stebbins. He didn't see me yet. He didn't need to. The whole street smelled of trouble steeping. Then another car arrived. Unmarked. Familiar. Kramer stepped out, trenchcoat half-buttoned, hat jammed on like someone had thrown it at him during a struggle. He scanned the street, and when his eyes hit me, something unreadable passed over his face. He jerked his head, a summons. No shouting, no bellowing, just a curt tilt. That alone told me someone significant had bought it. I crossed over. "Morning, Inspector," I said. "Looks lively." "Save it," he muttered. His voice wasn't angry, just scraped raw. "Greavy's dead." That knocked the wisecrack right out of me. Detective Greavy. One of Clara's 3 voices, one of the initials, one of the men plotting to shut someone up. Now, someone had shut him up permanently. "What happened?" I asked. "Neighbours heard a crash around 4. Patrol found him in his living room, no forced entry." "Suicide?" Kramer shook his head once. "No, and don't repeat that word. DA's already rattling my cage, and after Lamb yesterday, this is a department nightmare." He rubbed his jaw, cigar still unlit between 2 fingers. That was the second time in 2 days he'd carried a dead cigar into battle. If he'd stopped lighting cigars, things were bad. "I need you at the brownstone," he said. "Now. Wolfe needs to hear this from me, and you need to hear it from him." "I'm babysitting a terrified stenographer," I reminded him. "Stebbins will sit on her," Kramer said. "And keep your face shut. This is off the grid." Pearlie growled from behind us. "I ain't a nursemaid." "No," Kramer said. "You're worse. Do your job." I gave Pearlie the kind of grin men give bulldogs from behind fences. She bites. Then we're soulmates, Pearlie said. I shook Clara awake gently. Her eyes snapped open, already frightened. What's happened? Another officer's dead, I said. Greavy. Her hand flew to her mouth. One of the voices, oh God. Yes, I said. And you're under Stebbins' protection until I get back. Her terror welled again, but she nodded. Please, don't leave long. Long is not in my blood, I said. Ask Wolfe. He'd pay good money if I could sit still. Leaving her with Pearlie, who looked like he was guarding a vault instead of a woman, I headed for 35th Street and the brownstone. The world was still blue with dawn when I reached the door. Fritz answered, eyebrows raised at my early appearance. Mr. Wolfe is in the office. Inspector Kramer is with him. Perfect. I stepped into the office to find Kramer pacing, Wolfe planted like a marble statue, arms crossed, mouth compressed so tight he could have been storing secrets in there. Goodwin, Wolfe said. Close the door. I did. Kramer didn't wait. He's dead, Wolfe. Greavy. And this isn't a precinct headache anymore. It's a citywide aneurysm. Damn it, I need your help. He spat the words like they tasted bitter. Wolfe sighed. Inspector, your department manages homicides weekly. Not ones that start in squad rooms and end in my nightmares, Kramer barked. 2 officers dead in 24 hours, 1 about to testify, 1 tied to a file already missing, the DA's having palpitations, internal affairs is circling like buzzards, and someone, he jabbed a thumb toward me, has been tailed by my own detectives. I need this stopped. Wolfe tapped a thick finger on his chair arm. Confound it. For Wolfe, that was panic with a moustache. Kramer nodded grimly. Exactly. I gave Wolfe the update on Clara, the sedan, and Pearlie's unexpected gallantry. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed, fingers steepled. When I mentioned Greavy's name, he opened his eyes with a snap. Miss Breen identified him, Wolfe said, one of the 3. Yeah, I said. And now he's either silenced by guilt or silenced because he grew a conscience. Kramer stopped pacing. We found something odd. His bank records. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. Indeed. He took out money, a lot, but he wasn't paying anyone off. He was paying someone, I whistled. That's backward. Exactly, Kramer snapped. Whoever he was bankrolling, that might be our killer, or the reason he's dead. A classic red herring had floated around precinct chatter last night. Greavy being blackmailed by Lamb. I told Wolfe. He reacted with a disgusted phooey. Ridiculous, he said. If anyone was blackmailing anyone, Greavy was not the victim. He shifted his bulk forward. An earthquake event. Archie? Yes, sir? Fetch the envelope. I retrieved the manila folder containing Clara's photostats. Wolfe reviewed them again, scanning for anything we'd missed. He tapped the sheet listing the initials. R.G.H. Ralston, he said. Greavy, Houseman. And now Greavy is dead. One conspirator gone. Convenient for the others. Kramer exhaled hard. This is the part where you tell me what to do. Wolfe's eyes half-lidded. You presume too much, Inspector. A beat. Yet you are correct, I grinned. Wolfe accepting police gratitude. That's rarer than a unicorn with a badge. Wolfe glared. Archie, silence. Kramer rubbed his forehead. Look, I'll say it plainly. If you don't help me, Wolfe, this blows up the whole department, and the DA will put me on a stake. Wolfe looked genuinely annoyed, not at Kramer, but at the situation. Very well, he said. We proceed. He pointed at me. First, confer with Saul. Determine where Greavy's withdrawals went. Track every dollar. Already on it, I said. He's tailing Greavy's financial ghost. Good, Wolfe said, and report to Miss Breen. I'll check on her. You will reassure her, Wolfe added, to the extent that you are competent. That was Wolfe's version of an affectionate pat on the head. I'll take it. Kramer watched this exchange like he'd stumbled into family therapy. I'm leaving you the files, he said. You'll get everything IA sends me. You will, Wolfe corrected, not burden me with extraneous rubbish. Kramer didn't bristle. He was past that. Fine. He stood, coat dripping lightly on the rug. All right, Wolfe, he said. I'll wait for your report. There it was, the grudging respect clause of the day. Wolfe inclined his head. Good day, Inspector. Kramer left without stomping. That was practically tenderness. Once he was gone, Wolfe exhaled. Archie, the killer accelerated the timetable. Meaning? Greavy was preparing to flee, or to confess, perhaps both. I considered that. And that scared someone. Yes, Wolfe said, enough to silence him. I checked my watch. It's nearly 8. Fritz is probably plating dinner. As if summoned by prophecy, Fritz appeared in the doorway, immaculate as ever. Dinner is served. Wolfe closed his eyes. We will dine, then we resume. I hesitated. Sir, Clara's terrified. As she should be, Wolfe said, but she will survive, provided you ensure it. You're fond of her. I am fond, Wolfe said stiffly, of witnesses who retain the ability to speak. We headed to the dining room. Wolfe ate sparingly, his version of stress. After dinner, back in the office, he said, Archie, retrieve Saul's report as soon as he calls. Tonight may bring another development. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. And as I headed for the phone, the brownstone lights flickered, a quiver of the grid, before steadying again. A suspense hook if I ever saw one. If there's one thing the city of New York excels at, it's hiding dirt in corners no broom has ever met. And on that particular afternoon, I found myself examining one of those corners in the company of a man who could find a missing eyelash on a football field. Saul Pantzer walked half a pace ahead of me as we descended a narrow service stairway behind a radiator shop on 34th. It was one of those staircases that felt like it had been built during Prohibition to hide liquor barrels and the occasional lawyer. The air smelled like damp plaster and broken promises. Wolfe won't like this, I muttered as we reached the basement landing. Saul shot me a look. He doesn't have to know until you tell him. He always knows, I said. He's got a sixth sense for my sins. That's because you commit them loudly. Despite the ambience of a crypt, the basement wasn't completely dark. Thin, dusty beams of light seeped in from a street-level grate. Saul picked the padlock on the metal door in under 20 seconds, which made me question whether he'd been a cat burglar in a previous life. The door creaked open, revealing an industrial room that could have doubled as the set of a noir picture. Concrete floor, low beams, and lockers lined against the wall like soldiers ashamed of their orders. Welcome to Precinct 35's private pantry, Saul said under his breath. I stepped inside, whistling low. Impressive, if you're furnishing a militia. Inside the lockers sat radios, revolvers, batons, and boxes of ammunition, all with municipal labels, all unlogged, all very much not where the city of New York intended them to be. Well, I said, either the Boy Scouts got an upgrade or someone upstairs is running an off-books hardware store. Saul checked the labels. City procurement stamp. Recent deliveries. These should have gone through official channels. Should have, I echoed. But in 35, should and did don't always get invited to the same party. We found a filing crate shoved under a table. Inside were inventory sheets, unsigned, undated, and incomplete. The kind of paperwork one keeps when one doesn't want anyone else documenting anything. Saul handed me a sheet. False numbers, he said. These radios were recorded as defective and sent for disposal. And instead, I said, they came here for the precinct's private stockpile. Or someone's personal side business. I crouched to check under the table. A dusty crawl space ran behind the lockers, barely tall enough for a cat. I'd check that, but I'd have to write my own obituary first. Want me to look? Saul asked. No, I said. I'll send Wolfe. He loves enclosed spaces. That got me a rare Saul half-smirk, which I planned to frame mentally for later. We spent another 20 minutes examining the place. Everything pointed toward a coordinated effort. Falsified reports, rerouted supplies, storage off-site, and the kind of quiet cunning that made corruption feel like a habit rather than a hobby. My gut told me Houseman's fingerprints were all over it, but not alone. There was someone above him, someone who had the power to shuffle equipment like poker chips. When we emerged back onto the street, blinking like moles, Saul said, "You have to tell Wolfe." "I know, and he's going to forbid you from coming back." "He forbids a lot of things," I said, "but this time he'll mean it." Saul gave a small nod. "Be careful, Archie. 35 is fraying." Wolfe was in the office when I got back, sipping beer and scowling at a personnel chart like it had insulted his ancestry. "You are late," he announced. "I was in a basement," I said, "excavating your next headache." "Report." Saul came in behind me, dipping his head to Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe," Wolfe gestured toward the chairs. "Sit, explain." We walked him through the entire operation, the false lease, the off-book storeroom, the missing weapons, the doctored sheets. Wolfe listened with the stillness of a coiled python, lifting only one eyebrow near the end, equivalent to the average man screaming and fainting. When we finished, he said simply, "Confound it." "Neat layout," I told him. "They're running a side economy down there." "Not an economy," Wolfe said. "A scheme. Equipment resale, perhaps, or supplying an unauthorized enforcement group. In either case, it implies leadership above a mere detective." "Meaning?" "Someone with access to procurement channels, someone who signs off on returns." "Houseman?" I asked. "Houseman," Wolfe agreed, "or someone above him who uses Houseman as a shield." He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When Wolfe meditates, Manhattan trembles a little. Then he opened them and fixed me with a glare. "Archie Goodwin." "Yes, sir." "You will not, under any circumstances, return to that storeroom." "Why not?" I asked innocently. "Because," Wolfe snapped, "you are a target now. They are aware of you, and I will not have your corpse cluttering my schedule." I grinned. "You always say the sweetest things." Wolfe pointed a finger at me. "Enough. If you disobey, I shall." "Dock my pay?" "I shall consider it." Saul looked between us like he was watching an old married couple argue over wallpaper. Before Wolfe could escalate, the phone rang. Fritz appeared, gliding silently, and announced, "Inspector Kramer for you, sir." Wolfe scowled as if the universe were conspiring against digestion. "Put him through." Kramer's voice erupted, but not at full volume, just at full tension. "Wolfe, tell me something. Do you know why Internal Affairs is tearing my precinct apart?" Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "Perhaps because your officers have been rerouting radios and firearms to a clandestine cellar." Kramer swore so forcefully the receiver vibrated. I knew something was off, but hell, I didn't think this. Clearly. "I need personnel files," Wolfe said. 4 officers, Ralston Greavy, before his death, Houseman and Lamb. Kramer paused. "Wolfe, those files aren't public." "Pfui, spare me. You want my help? I require information. Files." Kramer exhaled like a man blowing steam out his ears. Fine, I'll get them. But if the DA asks, you will inform him," Wolfe said, "that you took prudent action to prevent further embarrassment to your department." Kramer grunted. "All right, Wolfe. I'll wait for your report." "Good day, Inspector." Wolfe hung up with surgical precision. Saul stood. "I'll dig further into the lease, the contractors, and anyone who's filed transport requests for those radios." "Excellent," Wolfe said. "Archie will remain here." "Under protest," I added. "Your protests," Wolfe said, "have the force of tissue paper." I saluted. "Then consider me thin and absorbent." Saul left with a nod. Wolfe turned to me. "The storm intensifies." "Tempest," I corrected. "Clara said they called it a tempest." Wolfe frowned. "Then the metaphor is apt. A tempest implies upheaval, destruction, and revelations. We are in the middle." "And Houseman is stirring the winds?" "Perhaps, or he is merely a gust. The gale may be higher." Wolfe rose, not quickly, but with a decisive push of his hands on the chair arms. "Archie, prepare a list of every officer who could authorize equipment disposal forms." "On it." "And a second list of every officer who filed them." "Also on it." "And a third list." "Boss," I said, "make it an even dozen. I'll alphabetize them." He glared, then relented. "You jest too freely." "It's coping," I said. "You try crawling through dusty basements without humor." He softened, fractionally. "Archie, your safety is not negotiable." "Well," I said, "I'm touched and alarmed." "Be alarmed," Wolfe said. "It may keep you alive." After a while, the orchids called him, and he rose, ritual in motion. "Do not leave," he ordered. "Yes, sir." "I mean it." "You always do." "Archie." "Yes?" "Be prudent." "Never my strong suit," I said, "but I'll pretend." He grunted, stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed with their usual soft finality. And as I turned back to the paperwork, the phone rang again. Once, sharply, like a warning shot. A suspense hook if there ever was one. Most people start their mornings with sunshine or newspapers. I started mine in a diner booth that smelled like it had been wiped down with bacon grease and panic. The rain outside smeared the window like a cheap watercolor, and across from me sat a patrolman who looked as if he hadn't slept since 1938. His name was Raymond Hart, and his hands trembled so badly the coffee in his cup performed a convincing imitation of a minor earthquake. Saul had found him hiding behind the diner's dumpster 15 minutes earlier. It was the sort of hiding place that tells you a man isn't thinking clearly unless he's been chased long enough to stop caring where he collapses. Saul brought him in, slid him into the booth, and then took the adjoining one to keep a lookout. The waitress, a redhead with the conversational warmth of a brick, plopped menus down without asking if we needed them. "Your Hart," I said. He nodded, eyes darting around the diner like every patron was packing a Precinct-issued revolver. "Yeah," he whispered. "Hart. Officer Raymond Hart." "You're a hard man to find," I said. "I've been chased by insurance salesmen with more confidence." He swallowed. "I couldn't go home. They're watching homes, and lockers, and the damn broom closet." "Who's they?" "Ralston, Houseman, others. I don't know who else knows." I picked up the phone receiver we'd placed on the table. Wolfe was on the line back at the brownstone, listening from his throne like a Roman emperor waiting for bread and revelations. "He's ready," I told Wolfe quietly. "Try not to scare him off with vocabulary." "Proceed," Wolfe's voice rumbled. The waitress returned. "What'll it be?" "Coffee," I said, "and milk." "We're out of cold." "Fine. Warm milk, then." She returned 2 minutes later with a mug of something that smelled like it had been boiled during the Taft administration. I stared at it. "Never mind," I said. "Coffee." In my ear, Wolfe muttered, "Your lamentable palate is an affliction." Hart leaned forward. "I didn't kill Lamb," he blurted. "Everyone thinks maybe I did, but I didn't. He was trying to help me. He was the only one I trusted." I sipped the coffee, which tasted tolerable compared to the milk catastrophe. "Start from the beginning." Hart wiped his face. I started noticing things. Missing radios, inventory numbers that didn't match, cases where evidence vanished. At first I thought it was clerical mistakes. Then I saw a pattern. Stuff marked defective was signed out by officers who never touched disposal paperwork. Who? Houseman. Sometimes Ralston. A few others following orders. "Running a side operation?" Hart nodded. "Off-books equipment. Some of it goes to private security firms, some to I don't know who. It's bad." "Did you report it?" "To IA? No, couldn't." He swallowed hard. "The IA investigator assigned to 35 is Frank Keever. He used to be Houseman's partner. They're still drinking buddies. If I'd gone to Keever, I'd be dead already." I felt the back of my neck tighten. It fit the picture Wolfe had been sketching, rot braided so tightly with procedure you couldn't tell one from the other. "So, what did you do?" I took notes, quietly, stashed copies in places no one checked. Then I got spooked. I didn't want my handwriting tied to it. So I asked Clara, Miss Breen, to type them. She's fast and discreet. "And Lamb?" "He found out by accident. He saw me hide one set of notes in a drawer. I begged him not to turn me in. Instead, he told me he'd help me hide them. Said he hated what was happening in the squad room." Hart's mouth quivered. "He was a good man." "And Ralston and Houseman?" They heard whispers. Someone tipped them off. They started hunting for the leak. They thought it was Lamb at first, then me. They cornered Lamb the night before he died, I'm sure of it. "And killed him?" Hart nodded miserably. I relayed this into the phone receiver. Wolfe's reaction was a single resonant hum, a sound he uses when the pieces of a puzzle click into place and he's annoyed by the elegance. Hart kept talking, words spilling now that the dam had cracked. "After Lamb died, I ran. I hid in alleys, then near the river, then here. Didn't know where else to go." His voice shrank. "I thought maybe you could help me, since Clara trusted you." "Clara didn't trust me," I corrected. "She trusted Wolfe. I'm just the delivery boy with good posture." Hart's laugh came out as a choked hiccup. "Wolfe?" I said into the phone. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "He wants asylum." Wolfe snorted. "This is not a temple. Nevertheless, bring him." Hart blinked. "What?" "You're coming to the brownstone," I told him. "If Wolfe wants you breathing, you'll stay breathing." He shook his head violently. "No, no. If they see me on the street, you'll be with me," I said. "Try to calm down. People don't shoot at me before lunch." From the phone came a dry, "Your levity is ill-timed, Archie." I grinned. "So is your concern, but I'll allow it." Saul stood and joined our booth. "The alley's clear," he murmured. "We can get him to a cab on 10th. Hart stared at me with desperate faith. "Can you really get me out of here alive?" "I've kept bigger fools alive under worse circumstances," I said. "You're practically a vacation." We paid the check. Saul left the tip, because my sense of generosity hadn't yet recovered from the milk episode, and slipped out the side door. Rain slapped the pavement in sheets thick enough to hide a cavalry charge. Saul led, Hart clung to my sleeve, and I kept an eye on street corners. 2 blocks later, a black sedan idled at a fire hydrant. My stomach performed a slow tumble, but the driver was reading a paper too calmly. No tension in the shoulders, no eyes darting over the top. Red herring. Probably a cabbie on break. Saul flagged down a taxi for us. Hart dove into the back seat like it was a bunker. I slid in after him and shut the door. 35th Street, I told the driver, near the brownstone with the attitude. As the car pulled away, Hart whispered, "They'll kill me." "Not tonight," I said. "Wolfe hates interruptions at dinner. He'll keep you alive out of pure spite." Hart didn't laugh, but some of the terror loosened. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz opened the door, eyebrows rising only a millimetre at the sight of a shivering patrolman in the foyer. Wolfe's voice floated from the office. "Archie, bring him." Hart stepped inside like a man entering confession. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Relax. The only homicide Wolfe commits regularly is toward the English language." And with that, we walked into the lion's den, the door closing behind us with a soft click that sounded very much like fate tightening its grip. Some evenings feel like the city has agreed to hold its breath, and that night Manhattan seemed to be waiting for someone, maybe Ralston, maybe me, maybe fate, to make the first wrong move. The air had the metallic taste of a subway rail, and the drizzle had come back just enough to smear the street lamps into hazy question marks. If there was ever a time to trap a killer, this was it. Wolfe had spent the late afternoon constructing his plan like an engineer laying dynamite. Hart was secured upstairs under Fritz's supervision. Fritz had given him soup, and judging by Hart's expression, it was the first safe sensation he'd had in days. Meanwhile, Wolfe dictated to me, slowly of course, exact phrasing for an article Lon Cohen would run in the Gazette's morning edition. The headline would read, "Whistleblower turns evidence over to Nero Wolfe with a subhead hinting arrest imminent." "It is misleading," Wolfe said, "but not dishonest. Mr. Hart possesses information, and the Gazette may imply he has shared all of it." "Which he hasn't," I said. "Precisely why it will agitate those who fear he has." I phoned Lon, who took such unholy pleasure in exclusive hints that he practically salivated over the receiver. "You're causing me trouble, Goodwin," he said, "but it's the fun kind." "You can repay me," I said, "by printing every comma exactly as Wolfe wrote it." "Deal." When I relayed Lon's enthusiasm to Wolfe, he gave a curt nod that, for him, bordered on giddy. By 8:47 p.m, the issue was set to run. By 9:30, Saul had taken up residence near the alley running behind the radiator shop, the same place we'd found the off-book storeroom. Pearlie Stebbins arrived too, stepping out of an unmarked sedan with his shoulders hunched like he was expecting an order of nails to fall on him. "Evening, Pearlie," I said. "Don't," he growled. "I'm here because Kramer doesn't want any more bodies. If he did, he'd send someone else." "That's practically affectionate," I said. "It's indigestion," he muttered. The three of us made an odd little coalition. The bulldog, the ghost, Saul, and me, the guy with the hat and the wisecracks. We checked the alley, the fire escapes, the street corners. The drizzle coated the pavement with the sheen of old silver. Somewhere in the distance, a saxophone bled through an open window, giving the night a proper noir soundtrack. At 10:21, Saul signalled from the far end of the alley. A figure approached, the unmistakable hunched gait of Detective Louis Ralston, his hat pulled low, collar raised. He moved with the stealth of a man terrified of his own shadow, and equally terrified that his shadow was watching him. "He took the bait," I whispered. "Of course he did," Pearlie said. "He's not bright enough to resist panic." Ralston reached the service door. We let him fumble with a key. Saul's angle gave him a view through the cracked window. "He's searching the lockers," Saul whispered. "Fast. Desperate." "Let him dig," I said. "He might find his conscience." After 5 minutes, Ralston emerged, wild-eyed, muttering to himself. He staggered into the alley, clutching a folder. That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. "Evening, Louis." Ralston jerked like a puppet whose strings had been yanked by a drunk puppeteer. "Goodwin," he croaked. "What the hell?" "You're trespassing," I said. "This is private property. Belongs to your precinct, technically. But I won't tell if you won't." His face flushed crimson. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Actually, I know quite a bit," I said. "I know you and Houseman cooked the books. I know equipment disappeared faster than a politician's promise. I know Lamb got in the way. And I know Hart's testimony is going to look mighty convincing once the Gazette hits the stands." Ralston's panic curdled into anger. He yanked a revolver from his coat. Pearlie stepped forward, but I waved him off. "Easy," I said. "You shoot me, Wolfe will never forgive you." That line hit him like a blackjack. He blinked, confused. "What?" "Wolfe," I repeated calmly. "The big guy. Sits in a chair, glares, orchids. You shoot me, he'll be furious. You don't want that kind of heat. Nobody does." Saul edged closer while Ralston processed my words like a man trying to swallow a bowling ball. "Look," Ralston stammered. "I didn't kill Lamb. I didn't. Houseman, he said Lamb knew too much. He went after him. I just cleaned up. Hid files, I swear it." "So Houseman's our man," I said quietly. "Yes," Ralston whispered. "He said the precinct needed discipline, that the Tempest was coming. He thought he could control it." "Why break into the storeroom tonight?" I asked. "He said the evidence might turn up there. I panicked when I saw the Gazette teaser. Thought Hart had turned everything over. I had to see what was left." Pearlie stepped forward. "Ralston, don't play dumb. Houseman's been running you for years." Ralston sagged. I know, but I didn't kill anyone. I just didn't stop it." "Accessory by cowardice," I muttered. "A specialty of the house." According to Ralston's trembling confession, Houseman had been the mastermind behind the equipment scheme, rerouting supplies, selling them off, using Ralston and Greevy as bookkeepers. When Hart got suspicious, Houseman ordered Ralston and Greevy to sniff out the leak. Lamb accidentally got in the way. Houseman silenced him personally. Greevy died when he threatened to confess. "Why kill your own partner?" I asked. "Because Greevy panicked," Ralston whispered. "Said he'd talk to the DA. Houseman said he'd take care of it. Next thing I know, Greevy's dead. And now," I said, "Houseman's cleaning up the final corner. Hart." Ralston nodded miserably. "He thinks Hart's hiding at a hotel. He's looking. He won't stop." That tightened my stomach. "Which hotel?" Ralston shook his head. "He didn't say. Just said he'd start with the cheap ones. Good thing Clara and Hart weren't in one." "Drop the gun," Pearlie ordered. Ralston obeyed, hands shaking so hard the revolver clattered on the pavement. "Stebbins," I said, "take him in, quietly." Pearlie cuffed him with professional efficiency. "Kramer will want a statement. And aspirin." Ralston stared at me. "You tell Wolfe. Tell him I didn't kill them." "I'll tell him," I said. "Whether he believes it is another topic." Saul approached. "Houseman?" "Still loose," I said. "And desperate," Pearlie frowned. "If he thinks Hart's with Goodwin, he might try the brownstone." "He won't get within 10 feet, I said. "Still," Pearlie grunted, "I'll call Kramer." He hauled Ralston away, muttering something about precincts that needed to be burned down and rebuilt from scratch. Saul and I walked toward 35th Street. "Wolfe will want every detail," he said. "He'll get them," I replied, "plus the part where I used his name as a bulletproof vest." "Wise," Saul said. "Genius," I corrected. The drizzle softened. Somewhere a siren wailed, fading into the maze of streets. As we turned the corner, I felt a chill not caused by weather. Houseman was still out there, and the Tempest he'd promised wasn't done yet. Most of the trouble I've seen in my career has walked on 2 legs, but that evening, trouble came sprinting down a hotel stairwell with the subtlety of a freight train. It began at 11:14 p.m., when the brownstone phone gave a single sharp ring, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, it demands it. Saul was on the line, and even through the static he sounded wired tight. "Goodwin," he said. "Houseman's on the move." "Where?" "Your girl's hotel. He's not alone." I didn't wait for more details. Wolfe's eyebrows shot up as I grabbed my coat. "Archie?" "Call Kramer," I said. "Tell him it's now or never." Wolfe opened his mouth, probably to remind me of mortality, but I was already halfway through the hall. The door slammed behind me like a warning shot. The cab I hijacked drove like he had stock in undertakers. I tossed money at him when we screeched to the hotel curb and bolted inside. The lobby was quiet. too quiet for a place with fresh footprints across the tile. The night clerk looked up, startled. "Your friend? Miss Breen. She just went upstairs with 2 officers. 2 officers, my foot. I took the stairs 3 at a time. On the 3rd floor landing I heard it, a muffled cry, a thud, and a man's hissed warning. I pulled my gun, not because Wolfe approves, but because breathing is one of my better habits, and nudged into the hallway. Houseman had Clara pinned at the far end near the fire exit. He had one hand on her arm and the other hovering near his jacket pocket, a pocket bulging with something metallic. Clara looked like she was 1 heartbeat from fainting. Houseman's face had that special gleam men get when they're convinced desperation is the same as authority. "Let her go," I said. Houseman jerked around. "Goodwin." His voice had the oily smoothness of a man who thinks charm and violence wear the same hat. "You should have stayed out of this." "I tried," I said, "but you precinct boys keep sending me invitations." He yanked Clara tighter. "She's coming with me." "Where? A basement? A riverfront tour?" "Shut up," he snarled. I lifted my gun a little. "You won't make it down 1 flight with her." "I've made it through worse." "Not through me," I said, "and not tonight." For a moment, we stood there like actors refusing to miss their cue. The hallway hummed with the tension of an invisible violin string. Then Clara whimpered, and something in Houseman's grip tightened. "She typed the notes," he said. "She started all this. She and that rat, Hart." "She typed what you created," I said. "You built the scheme. You killed Lamb. You killed Greavy." His eyes flicked with raw fury. "Ralston talked," I smirked. "I didn't say that." Houseman's hand twitched toward his pocket. I raised my gun. "Don't," I said. "You're quicker, but I'm funnier, and bullets like humour." His lip curled. Then, blessedly, the stairwell door at the opposite end of the hall burst open. Pearlie Stebbins barreled in with 2 uniforms behind him. "Houseman," Pearlie barked. "Drop it!" Houseman froze. For a split second he looked between me, Pearlie, and the fire exit like he was running math in his head. He reached again. I moved. Pearlie moved. Clara shrieked. The officers piled in, tackling Houseman before he could clear the pocket. He hit the floor hard enough to rattle teeth down the hallway. Clara broke free and stumbled toward me. I caught her before she collapsed. Pearlie cuffed Houseman with professional relish. "You," he growled, "are done." Houseman thrashed once, then sagged. "You think you've solved anything?" he spat. "You think you know the whole story?" "I know enough," Pearlie said, "and Wolfe'll know the rest." Houseman twisted to glare at me. "I should have killed you first." "Get in line," I said. Kramer arrived 30 seconds later, hat askew, tie crooked, breath heavy, but not yelling. That alone could have made the week's headlines. "Goodwin," he said. "You all right?" "You're asking?" "Officially," he said. "I just happened to be nearby." "Officially," I replied. "You're terrible at lying." He exhaled through his nose. "Just get her out of the hallway." Clara clung to my arm while Pearlie hauled Houseman upright and the uniforms flanked him. As they escorted him away, the hotel guests peeked from their doors like frightened mice watching a cat parade. Kramer wiped rain and sweat from his forehead. "Wolfe wants him." "Wolfe insists on it," I said. "It's his show." Kramer grunted. "All right, I'll bring him. But if Wolfe starts lecturing me about horticulture while I'm standing next to a murderer, I'm leaving him there." "He won't," I promised. "Well, he might, but I'll distract him." Kramer shook his head. "Your funeral." Some nights the brownstone feels like a fortress. Other nights it feels like a theatre waiting for the curtain to rise. That evening, it was both. When I stepped into Wolfe's office, the place had been arranged with the kind of geometry that would have made Euclid weep with joy. Chairs were positioned in a semicircle facing Wolfe's desk. Papers lay in a neat stack at his right hand. The globe gleamed. The rug had no wrinkles. Fritz had even banished the usual stray orchid catalogue from the side table. It was the stage set for demolition, the moral kind. Kramer arrived first, shoulders broad, trench coat dripping, cigar unlit but clenched like an oath. Pearlie came next, steering Ralston, handcuffed but less shaky now that confession had lifted the weight of murder from his conscience. Houseman followed, escorted by 2 uniforms. He looked furious enough to bite through the cuffs. Clara sat near the window, hands clasped, jaw tight. Hart hovered beside her, pale but upright. Saul was present too, leaning against the wall with the expression of a man tracking every heartbeat in the room. I took my usual post near Wolfe's right side. Wolfe surveyed the room. "We may begin." Kramer snorted. "Your house, your show. I'm just here to referee." Wolfe ignored him. He folded his hands over his belly, took a deep breath, and began in that sonorous voice that could silence a Senate committee. "Gentlemen, Miss Breen, the matter before us concerns the internal corruption within Precinct 35 and the deaths of Officers Lamb and Greevy. I have reconstructed events. You will listen." He let silence settle, thick as velvet. "First," he said, "the equipment resale scheme. It began at least 2 years ago. City-purchased radios and weapons were declared defective or lost. They were rerouted to a clandestine storeroom leased under an assumed name. Detective Houseman," he inclined his head toward the prisoner, "oversaw this enterprise. Detectives Ralston and Greevy maintained the false paperwork." "Lies," Houseman spat. "Silence," Wolfe said without raising his voice. It worked better than a gun. Wolfe continued. "Officer Hart, a conscientious man, noticed discrepancies, missing equipment, doctored report numbers. His inquiries hinted at the scale of the scheme." Hart swallowed hard but said nothing. "Fearing internal affairs was compromised," Wolfe said. Hart neutralized his vulnerability. He documented everything: lists, inventories, names. He then asked Miss Breen, trusted for her discretion, to type the notes. She complied. Clara nodded tightly. "Officer Lamb," Wolfe went on, "stumbled upon Hart's notes by accident, but instead of turning him in, he offered to help safeguard them. For that, he died." Kramer shifted his weight. Pearlie scowled. Ralston stared at the floor. I watched Houseman. He sat like a man welded into his chair, expression carved from resentment. Wolfe tapped a finger on his desk. "Now, to the Tempest." He turned slightly toward Clara and Hart. "The conspirators learned someone was gathering evidence. Hart ran. Lamb was cornered. Greevy panicked. He spoke of confessing. Houseman," Wolfe looked directly at him, "silenced both." Houseman barked a laugh. "Proof? You've got none." "We shall see," Wolfe murmured. Kramer folded his arms. "Wolfe, get to the part that nails him. I'm ready to drag him out of here head first." Wolfe raised a brow. "Patience, Inspector." He reached for the top sheet of the carefully stacked papers. "This," he said, "is the envelope that Mr. Goodwin received the night this began. A plea for assistance. A warning of imminent murder." He let the envelope rest on his palm. Everyone watched. "It bore a seal," Wolfe said, "a small emblem embossed on the flap. Mr. Goodwin and I initially thought it decorative. Theodore Horstman identified it as a stylized form used by the Police Benevolent Association for internal memos, rarely employed, and only by clerical staff in specific precinct offices." Clara gasped softly. Hart blinked. Wolfe leaned forward. "Only one room in Precinct 35 possesses that seal, the back office where Miss Breen works." Houseman stiffened. Kramer grunted. "So that means the person who sent the letter had access to that room," Wolfe finished. "Hart, naturally, but consider, Officer Hart was in hiding at the time and had no opportunity to deliver it. Miss Breen was frightened but unaware Lamb was dead until later. Someone else used the PBA seal, someone who wanted us to believe the informant was in imminent danger." Ralston shivered. "Hart," Wolfe said calmly, "did you send the envelope?" "No, sir," Hart said at once. "I never left the precinct that night." "Miss Breen?" "No," she whispered. "I didn't even know about the seal until you mentioned it." Wolfe turned to Ralston. "Did you deliver a letter to Mr. Goodwin?" Ralston shook his head vigorously. "No, I swear it. I never went near his place." Wolfe nodded, unsurprised. "Which leaves," he said, "one man." He pointed at Houseman. "Me?" Houseman snarled. "Why in hell would I warn you? Why would I?" "To create confusion," Wolfe said sharply. "To suggest Lamb was threatened so grievously that someone, anyone, might be blamed. You wanted to send Mr. Goodwin scrambling while you positioned yourself to eliminate Hart. But you made a mistake." He lifted the envelope. "This seal. You used it thinking no one would notice, thinking any clerical worker might have sent it. But only 3 people had access that night: Hart, Miss Breen, and you." Houseman's face blanched. "And," Wolfe added with ferocious calm, "you attempted to kill Hart shortly afterward. Your actions betray your guilt. You believed Hart had revealed everything. You believed he had written the letter. Therefore, you tried to silence him. Kramer took a step forward. That's enough for me. Wait, Wolfe said. There is more. He motioned to me. Archie, the timeline. I pulled the photostat sheets and handed them to Wolfe, who fanned them like cards in a magician's reveal. These are the typed notes. Miss Breen's work, based on Hart's originals. The earlier pages refer only to missing equipment. Later pages, he tapped one, document Lamb's involvement. The shift aligns precisely with when Hart confided in Lamb. He turned to Ralston. Did Houseman pressure you? Ralston's voice cracked. Yes. He said if I didn't help hide the paperwork, I'd be buried with them. Describe his actions the night Greevy died, Wolfe said. Ralston squeezed his eyes shut. He told me Greevy was cracking, said he'd take care of it. He left. Next morning, Greevy was gone. Hart trembled. Clara reached over and steadied his hand. Wolfe's voice dropped like a gavel. This was not a tempest of nature. It was a tempest of conscience, of corruption collapsing under its own weight. Houseman believed himself invulnerable. His error was assuming guilt can always be hidden with intimidation. He leaned back, expression as cold as marble. Inspector, you may proceed. Kramer took a long step toward Houseman. The uniforms moved with him. Louis Houseman, he said, you are under arrest for the murders of Officers Lamb and Greevy and for conspiracy to defraud the city of New York. Houseman surged to his feet, but Pearlie shoved him back down with one hand. Sit, Pearlie growled. As the cuffs snapped shut, Houseman spat. This is a setup. You can't pin this on me. I believe we just did, I said. Pearlie dragged him out. Ralston followed, escorted but not manhandled. The door shut behind them with a click that sounded like a cell door somewhere echoing its welcome. Kramer remained. He cleared his throat and tugged his coat straight. Wolfe, he said gruffly, good work. Wolfe didn't smile, but his chin dipped an inch. Inspector. Don't make me say it twice, Kramer grumbled. You helped the department today. You helped yourself, Wolfe returned. As is your duty. Kramer huffed. Yeah, well, Pearlie and I will handle cleanup. He started for the door. I'll wait for your written statement. You shall have it, Wolfe said. Kramer paused, then added, without looking back, Thanks, Wolfe. Then he left. Silence settled like dust after a demolition. Wolfe exhaled. Archie. Yes, sir. For your exertions, he paused, searching for wording that wouldn't betray affection. You may accept my approbation. I grinned. Boss, you love me only when I'm useful. He scowled, then strived to remain so. Fritz appeared, serene as sunrise. Dinner is ready, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe stood, at last. As he headed for the dining room, I followed, feeling the tension finally release. Case closed. Tempest weathered.